The story took place during World War I. 12 sabotage operatives trained in Britain secretly infiltrated German-occupied territory. 11 of them were captured, and only one man was still on the run. In the freezing snow, the last survivor, Jan Baalsrud, knocked the ice off his pistol just as he turned around. 2 German soldiers rushed after him. Jan raised his gun and fired twice, taking them down. He had already been running across the snow for a long time. He slipped, and one of his shoes fell off in the snow, but he didn't stop to pick it up and kept running. German soldiers kept chasing him from behind. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. A bullet hit his foot. One of his toes was blown off instantly. Blood poured out at once. Little by little, it stained the white snow red. Jan didn't stop. He gritted his teeth and kept running. There were 12 men in this mission. The other 11 had already been captured. He was the only one still free. If he was caught too, the entire operation would completely fail. German soldiers chased him all the way to the coast. That's when Jan suddenly realized he had been leaving a trail of blood behind him. If the soldiers followed the blood, there was no way he could escape. The Germans quickly followed the blood trail to the shore. But when they reached the beach, the blood suddenly disappeared. They had lost the target. Meanwhile, Jan had already crossed over a mountain and successfully shaken off the pursuers. Night fell. Jan sat down in the snow and took off his shoe. Enduring the intense pain, he pulled his sock over his injured foot. The German soldiers didn't stop searching. Suddenly the sky lit up. Flares shot into the air. The whole night sky looked as bright as daytime. Soldiers were patrolling everywhere in the distance. Jan had no choice but to keep moving forward. This time, he decided to take a risk. Ahead of him was a narrow strait. The seawater was freezing cold, but if he could swim across, he might have a chance to escape. Jan jumped straight into the sea. A German officer on the shore walked down to the water. He reached out and touched the sea. It was painfully cold. The officer sneered. There's no way he survives that. But at that moment, Jan was already fighting his way toward the other side. He was almost frozen solid. His body collapsed on the shore. Soon after, a young couple discovered him. They dragged Jan back to their home. The family decided to hide him. Meanwhile, German officer Kurt Stage was listening to a report. A soldier said, "All 12 men have been captured." But Kurt Stage didn't believe it. He said coldly, "One is missing. The 12th man is still alive." He immediately ordered another search. Check every place where someone could hide. Early the next morning, Jan had regained a little strength. He decided to move again. His goal wasn't just to escape. He wanted to find a way to help his captured teammates. At the same time, his captured companions were being held in a hospital. Kurt Stage began running an experiment. He forced prisoners to step into the ICC, while soldiers recorded how long they could last. If they knew how long a person could survive in that water, they could judge whether Jan had any chance of living. The first man couldn't last long. The second man failed just as quickly. Kurt Stage frowned. He decided to try it himself. He slowly stepped into the freezing water. Not long after, even he couldn't stand it anymore, but he still refused to believe Jan was dead. That night, the 11 captured men were all executed. Meanwhile, Jan arrived at a friend's house belonging to the family who had helped him. The woman there was a nurse. She told January that all of his teammates had been captured. The mission had failed. Jan had to change his route. First, he would escape to Sweden, then find a way to return to England. They helped Jan find someone trustworthy. They also gave him a new pair of shoes. That night, they used a boat to take Jan toward the coast. The boat couldn't get too close to shore. To keep Jan from freezing again in the water, a strong man jumped straight into the ICC. He carried Jan on his shoulders and walked step by step to the shore. The story took place in wartime Norway. Jan and his companions were resistance fighters trained in Britain. Their original mission was codenamed Red Martin. The goal was to sabotage a German military harbor in Norway, but because their contact failed, the mission was exposed. 11 men were captured. Only Jan managed to escape. Meanwhile, Kurt Stage still hadn't found the 12th man. The report had not yet been sent. He changed the number on the report from 11 to 12. He chose to believe only one thing, that the 12th man had died in the freezing sea. A few days later, Jan arrived at a German military camp. It was directly along his path. He had no choice but to walk through it. The snow was slippery. Jan wasn't very skilled at skiing. Suddenly he lost his balance. He fell hard and crashed into a nearby vehicle. Even worse, Kurt Stage happened to be in that camp. Jan kept his head down and avoided eye contact with anyone. Just as he was about to leave, Kurt Stage suddenly called out to him. Jan stopped walking. Kurt Stage stared at him for a moment, but didn't recognize him. Jan nodded and said, "Thank you, sir." Then he slowly walked away, but just as Kurt Stage was about to return to his room, he suddenly realized something. That strange man from earlier might have been the 12th survivor. By then, Jan had already skied away. Suddenly, a fighter plane flew overhead. The aircraft began circling above him. Jan immediately sensed danger. He quickly turned and started escaping. The plane soon locked onto him. Machine guns opened fire. Bullets ripped across the snow. Jan desperately dodged left and right. Bullets whizzed past his body. The fighter turned again for another attack. Jan had to ski downhill. Otherwise, he would be an easy target. Gunfire echoed through the valley. Suddenly, the snow on the mountain began to shift. An avalanche was triggered. Jan lost one of his ski poles. He tried to rush forward with all his strength, but the next second, a massive wave of snow swallowed him whole. The pilot saw what happened and turned away. He later reported to Kurt Stage. The target may have been buried by the avalanche, but Kurt Stage remained cautious. He said, "If he's still alive, there are only 3 ways down the mountain. This time, I won't let him escape." Under the snow, Jan was still alive, but he was badly injured. His face was covered in blood. His fingernails were torn. He was suffering from a serious concussion. With great effort, he crawled out of the snow. The sun was about to set, but the real test had only just begun. Jan dragged his body forward because of his injuries. He began having hallucinations. It was as if another version of himself was standing nearby, mocking him. After the soldiers left, they immediately ran toward the woods. Jan rushed into a house when he saw food. He began stuffing it into his mouth like a starving man. 2 men entered the house and asked the woman to stand watch outside. They examined Jan's injuries. His right foot had become badly infected. With their help, Jan was finally saved. A few days later, Jan woke up again. Suddenly, the sound of vehicles came from outside. Kurt Stage had arrived in person. They were about to search every farm in the area. Kurt Stage walked into the storage barn. Jan was hiding inside. He pointed his pistol toward the door, just as Kurt Stage prepared to climb to the 2nd floor. The metal on his chest suddenly fell to the ground. That metal was the honor he valued the most. He immediately bent down to pick it up. Because of that moment, Jan avoided the search for safety. The family decided to move him right away. They worked together carefully. They guided Jan through a checkpoint. Then they finally placed him on a small boat.